warm welcome. A warm welcome to every single one of you who are joining us today on our annual JSE Sustainability Showcase event. This year we have a series of events, very exciting ones lined up for you, and I hope you're going to have a wonderful time joining us. So in the morning today, the first session is going to be our traditional company showcase session, where we have the honor of having with us 4 outstanding companies listed on the JSE in very different sectors, on very different sustainability journeys, but each of them charting their own course and really shifting the dial on what it means to be sustainable companies and how they're actually doing that. I think you really enjoy the sessions we have lined up, but without further ado, before we get into the showcase session, I want to hand over to the JSE CEO, Dr. Leila Fourie, herself very passionate about the sustainability agenda, who will take us through her opening address. Over to you, Leila. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to 2021 edition of the JSE's annual Sustainability Showcase. This event is a high point in the JSE calendar, and I really look forward to the next 2 days of presentations and panel discussions. The showcase is designed to shine the light on a wide range of important topics, including corporate sustainability practices and strategy. It's an opportunity to engage with local and international experts and learn more about how corporates are responding to ESG matters and aligning to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The JSE has a long history in sustainability, from data products to investable assets and governance standards. The South African listed market is also considered one of the global leaders in disclosure due to the many efforts of our listed companies. A recent assessment by our ESG rating partner FTSE ranked a subset of JSE listed companies as number 5 in terms of the world's average ESG score, which is really awesome. This ranking reflects the consistent efforts of many South African listed companies and the ecosystem, which has enabled this progress over a number of years. While ranking is good, we know we still have a lot more to do, particularly in the area of disclosure. Earlier this year, we co-chaired the development of a climate change disclosure model guidance for stock exchanges globally under the auspices of the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative, and we plan to bring you much more on this soon. The exchange is also working with National Treasury's Sustainable Finance Working Group to finalize a handbook which will be of great value to both the financial sector as well as the real economy. The global environment for ESG is rapidly evolving. In the developed world, we continue to see record flows into the ESG-themed investments. However, regulation, civil society awareness, and activism are quickly emerging as notable factors affecting the sustainable landscape. With these factors in mind, it's easy to feel a sense of ease that sustainability is now front and center of our agendas. But the reality is that much more needs to be done. In August, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6th Assessment Report on the Physical Science Basis for Climate Change was released. The UN Secretary General called this Code Red for humanity, given how perilously close we are to the internationally agreed 1.5-degree threshold. Many of the changes resulting from the global heating are irreversible. And in Africa, and specifically sub-Saharan Africa, we are locked into a much higher temperature increase than many other areas. Coupled with high rates of unemployment and deep inequality, the climate risks are as much a social concern as they are an environmental one. But solutions are possible if we act swiftly. As a business, we have a key role to play. We have set out this year's events with a focus on climate change alongside our traditional company showcase portion. We're glad to give the stage to our listed companies who have been included in the FTSE JSE Responsible Investment Indices to speak about their journeys in sustainability. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights with us. Later in the day, we'll have esteemed groups of panelists speaking about our climate risk and opportunities. A special thank you to Dr. Brian Matlana, who is speaking in his capacity as Commissioner on the Presidential Climate Change Commission. We are really honored to have you. Alongside Dr. Matlana, we have Robbie Lowe of Prometheum Carbon, who has worked in climate change strategies and footprinting with many listed companies. Andrew Gilder, a leading change lawyer, climate change lawyer who has been active in this space for over a decade, sharing his views and aspects on issues such as climate litigation. Arvana Singh, who leads sustainable finance for Nedbank, an undoubted leader and pioneer in sustainability. Our able moderator, Ms. Chantal Naidu, who works very closely in various government departments, is active in social justice and has worked in climate finance for many, many years. To round off, tomorrow we have an exciting symposium on transition finance in collaboration with the IFC and with support from the GIZ. The matter on transition finance has become topical across the globe and holds significance for economies such as ours, which are carbon intensive. Markets will have a critical role to play, and the credibility of transition finance will be pivotal. This session will bring you cutting-edge local and global views and compelling speakers from South Africa and abroad. Our speakers will cover topics such as the role of just transition and seek to debate whether transition finance is just another label or a new paradigm for the finance sector. Thank you to our partners and to everyone who has taken time to join us to support the JSE as we evolve our journey of making the markets a force for good in sustainable development. I hope you find our sessions valuable, and I hope that you make use of our channels to share your ideas as we work together for a shared prosperity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fourie, for that inspiring message to start the day. And I think I'd also want to reiterate her messaging about the critical time that we're in now, and that it is undoubted that sustainability matters to every single one of us, and is becoming more of a mainstream issue as we're seeing, and no longer something that's been considered on the periphery. With that note, I want to hand over to our first company showcasing today, which is none other than MTN. Now, many of you can say yellow, good morning, and I would like to say yellow and good morning to Nompilo Marafo and to Charles Molapisi, who will be joining us this morning to take us through MTN's sustainability journey and their plans. Now, the tech sector, of course, has an absolutely critical role to play in enabling the future that we want. Technology is a connector. Technology brings us together, and it crosses and it helps us bridge many divides. So it is absolutely a pleasure today to welcome Nompilo, who is the Group Executive for Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at MTN, and Charles Molapisi, who is the Group Chief Technology Officer and Information Services Officer, who will take us through MTN's sustainability journey. They will present for around about 20 minutes, and then after that, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So keep those pencils sharp, write your thoughts down, and they will give us an opportunity to answer some of their questions later on. Nompilo, Charles, over to you and welcome.
Thank you, Shamila. Yellow and good morning to ladies and gentlemen that have joined the showcase this morning. My name is Nompilo Marafo. I'm the executive responsible for sustainability and corporate affairs at MTN. I'm joined by Mr. Charles Molapisi, who's our group CTIO. Charles, if you can introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here to share MTN's plans, in achieving our ambitions, of net zero emissions by 2040. Thank you, Nompilo.
Thank you, Charles. So as we all know, MTN is an emerging market mobile operator. We're at the forefront of technology and digital transformation across the markets in which we operate. We provide services across a range to approximately 280 million customers in 20 markets across Africa and the Middle East, 17 of which are in Africa. We are really inspired by our belief that everyone deserves the benefits of a modern connected life, which is what really our sustainability strategy is based on, and we'll unpack further with Charles as we go through the presentation. We employ approximately more than 19,000 people across our footprint, and we really believe in creating shared value and prosperity for all our stakeholders, and we'll address that in the presentation as we go along. So first and foremost, the telco sector, similar to other sectors as well, is really experiencing an increased need for us to focus on sustainability and ESG as we progress our sustainability and our strategy for the organization itself. We work collaboratively with all other industry players, particularly on the area of climate change, which is what Charles is really going to deep dive on later in the presentation. We participate in the roadmap to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, which is in line with Paris Agreement. And we have seen an increase in respect of digital human rights and privacy as more users come online. So after all of this, we believe that inclusion really is part of internet freedom and safety, and there isn't any freedom without being safe online. So all of these things are coming into the forefront, and you will see as we unpack, we are requested and our investors are looking upon companies like MTN to really focus on target setting around the areas of climate change. Waste management has become a big thing. Digital rights and privacy, like I mentioned, are also at the forefront, and it's something that has really been put forward by most of our stakeholders for MTN to look at, and of course, energy management. So what are we going to do about this? And I'm just going to take you through quickly the roadmap that MTN has put forward for us to be able to respond to the sustainability challenges as we unpack our strategy. So at MTN, we call it ESG. We name it ESG is at the core of our strategy. Why do we say that? So we have just launched the new strategy for the company called Ambition 2025. Ambition 2025, a strategic intent is to lead digital solutions for Africa's progress. This is something that we're very proud of. I started the presentation by mentioning that we are in Africa and we're also in the Middle East, but we recently announced our exit of the Middle East, where the focus of the new strategy being for Africa's progress. So Ambition 2025 really is supposed to be our blueprint to accelerate growth over the next 3 to 5 years so that we can deliver on our strategic intent of leading digital solutions for Africa's progress. And also we're starting to really reveal and crystallize the value that our company, we believe, is embedded in our business strategy. So shared value is a critical part of this journey. It's one of our strategic priorities, and it's supported by ESG that I just mentioned just now, that is at the core of our delivery of Ambition 2025 as a strategy. This means that MTN is not only focused on the sustainability of the company in terms of strategic intent, but it means that our sustainability looks at the sustainability of the markets, communities, and the nation states in which we operate. So what are the highlights that we have put forward in terms of us achieving this target that's been set by Ambition 2025? So we're very excited with our announcement and the commitments we've made around reaching net zero emissions by 2040, which is what we're going to deep dive on with this presentation. We call that Project Xaro, and it's something that we're very excited about. We believe that it can really set the industry, not only MTN, apart, because we have seen how other companies have come to the fore in terms of learning from what MTN is doing in terms of them achieving their net zero emissions as well. Our work to support sustainable societies, we really want to focus on reducing the cost to communicate. We want to enable digital and financial inclusion across our markets. We want to make sure that internally our people remain diverse. This is the area where MTN really wants to differentiate itself. We want to ensure that we're leading in that area because it's one of our superpowers is really connectivity throughout our markets. In terms of governance, as I mentioned before, we've been called on really to lead in terms of safeguarding digital human rights across our markets. So it's something that's very tricky for organizations like telecommunications to do this, but we recognize the importance and the role that many of our stakeholders play in the journey as we improve our response to digital human rights. The company of our size and the company that is MTN in what we do, this is something that we really want to put forward and ensure that we go through this journey with all our partners, especially the partners in governments and regulators in which we operate. So if you look at the right hand side of this graphic, you'll see that in the first half of 2021, MTN's contribution in economic value add totaled to about 50 billion. This is nearly a billion rands, which is nearly about 3.5 billion US dollars at current exchange rates. This is not an insignificant amount. So this is the area that we take very seriously as a company because we believe this is where we derive really shared value for our stakeholders, for our communities, and for the nation states where we operate. So at MTN, we see success not only in being a leading emerging market mobile operator, but in being an African champion, advancing connectivity, partnering for socio-economic progress, and being a leader in ESG issues across our markets. So I've mentioned quite a few commitments, and before Charles comes in, I wanted to just mention a few more in terms of the journey that we have embarked on really, and part of it has been by the focus of what we use JSE FTSE as a North Star in terms of development of our sustainability strategy. We over and above just announcing our net zero emissions by 2040, we also issued our very first transparency report in 2020. This has been very pivotal in our strategy, especially Ambition 2025, because like I just mentioned, we want to increase disclosure around digital human rights, the risks and the opportunities that we're seeing in that area, and the approach that we take in terms of us responding to these issues. We're committing really to diversity and inclusion, and we've set a target of 50% women across our workforce by 2030 from the 38% current base. We have linked ESG KPIs to executive pay, and then you're going to see that coming forth once we announce our results next year as well. We have seen a huge improvement in rating agencies and how they rate and look at MTN, which is something that we're very proud of seeing in 2021. I mentioned the improvement with the FTSE Russell, where we currently sitting at 3.7, previously was 2.9. So these are the achievements that we've seen coming forth. There's many more, but I wanted to highlight a few, especially also that our focus on climate change has seen us appointing a board member to actually be the person that looks after climate change for the organization. That's something also that was driven mostly by our participation in the FTSE, and it's something that we're very proud of because we're seeing the results of it and the importance and the focus by the boards at MTN as a result. So where to from now? Sustainability is not new from MTN. We developed our framework in 2011 already, but we want to evolve and we want to learn and we want to look at how we can develop the strategy framework further. The accountability of the strategy sits at a very senior level of the organization, being overlooked by the Social and Ethics Committee. As you see, Charles and myself, it's something that we've been tasked with by the organization to make sure that we move forward and MTN actually makes the difference that it's made to make in terms of digital and financial inclusion. We really want to make sure that we have a set of policies and procedures that address each theme within our sustainability strategy in order for us to be able to succeed across our markets. So on that note, I'm gonna like to call on Charles to the stage to just take us through our net zero strategy and how we're gonna reach 2040 targets. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Nompilo and Yellow, to everyone on the call. I'm just going to talk, I mean, you heard my colleague, Nompilo, talks about ESG being at the core at MTN. I think sort of like just to buttress that point is that what we really mean is that ESG for us is not something that sits at the periphery of our business. It sits in terms of how we design our product and services, how we engage our vendors, how we build relationships, and how do we actually eventually deploy our solutions and our network in the market. So, what I want to show you now is, what is sort of like the greenhouse, gas profile for MTN. We say that as a business, we believe in the benefits of a modern connected life, but we also believe in the benefits of a healthy planet as an organization. It is for this reason that as MTN, we pledged our commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2040. If you look at the profile in terms of scope 1 and scope 2, you're talking about 83%, as the contribution coming from scope 1 and scope 2. That really tells you eventually that for us to achieve our ambitions of the net zero emissions by 2040, we're really going to rely on innovation, but primarily we're going to rely on partner collaboration. And I'll touch on that in terms of engagement with the vendors, what we have done and how we're going to be able to move forward. Our energy sources are predominantly diesel, and power from national grids. This is really largely to power, all the large scale of our network across all the markets in which we operate. The question is, if you look at this profile, what then is a plan? How are we going to do it? And then I'll show you now that the plan that we have crafted in place, we are driving an enterprise-wide program, that we call the Project Xaro program. But the ambition, if you look at it, is that by 2030, we should be able to reduce 47 reduction in overall emissions, of both scope 1, scope 2, and of course, scope 3. And then we're looking at about 77.6% average reduction in energy consumption per sub by 2030. As we push and we put technology in the network, we're looking at AI automated solutions to enable us to put the network to sleep and do automated shutdowns to allow us to manage the traffic profile as we reduce the level of consumption of energy on the sites. These are all the ambitions that we have set for ourselves. So we've got a broad ambition of 2040. And then we have cut this ambition down into 2030 as a target. And these targets are properly well socialized across all the markets in which we operate. If you look into the next chart, you'll see that what we're emphasizing is that if you look at the whole program to net zero, what is the journey? How are we going to do it? There are a number of interventions that we put in place, from the energy side, from how we're going to manage the deployment of gensets in the market, the innovation in terms of solutions, how we're going to manage the issue of cooling and power. So all of these are all the interventions that we are able to implement to Project Xaro. Just to emphasize that Project Xaro program is an enterprise-wide program. It is not a group-based program. It is not South Africa's based program. It is not an exco-based program. It's a program that we have designed that is enterprise-wide. And all the CTOs across the markets, myself as well from the center, the CEOs, and of course the regional VPs will all carry the KPI to ensure that the targeted reductions per market are achieved. So what we have done is that we've managed to give each and every OPCO the specific level of targets for them to achieve by 2030, and all of them are broken down on a yearly basis. So like I mentioned earlier on, that for us to achieve this, we can only do this if we work with our partners. We're lucky that in the engagement with our partners, we've seen a significant level of response. I mean, look at, group-wide suppliers, 193 of them have pledged a commitment to join us, to achieve the net zero, target, for 2040. If you look at it, about 133 of them have responded. This is about 38% of the group's, key supplier spend that have joined us to be able to work with us to be able to comply and to pledge themselves as companies to support MTN's pledge for 2040 net zero emissions. It is important for this because we see this as a broader ecosystem thing. It's not just going to be an MTN thing. Our network is largely managed by vendors. The rollout of our size, most of the markets where we're running, on outsourced networks, that's when we need a lot of support from them. And I think we're very happy that many of them are coming on board. We continue the engagement to make sure that we bring most of the suppliers to support us. But we're comfortable that as we move forward, we've got a broader support of all the suppliers across our markets to help us to be able to achieve this ambition. We are confident as MTN that the ambitions we've set forward, as audacious as they are, we believe they're achievable. We believe the organization is geared towards achieving all the ambitions we've set for ourselves, by 2040. So with that, I would like to hand over to Nompilo, maybe to conclude, on where we are and going forward. Thank you, Nompilo.
Sorry, with that in conclusion, thank you, Charles. Really, we're looking at a step change in our ESG performance and positioning at MTN. And what do we mean by that? Like Charles mentioned, we don't want to pay lip service to sustainability, and the company's strategy and the purpose and the belief really suggest that we really believe that everybody deserves the benefits of a modern connected life. We want to be at the top quartile in ESG ratings. We've seen huge improvement in that area with the JSE FTSE recent results. Net zero emissions by 2040 is a focus that the organization has paid a lot of focus on. We want to see that improving. As Charles mentioned again, it's something that's owned across MTN's operations and markets. It's not an MTN group initiative alone. We really want to focus on diversity and inclusion and the target of 50% women by 2030. We're enhancing the response and the proactiveness of how we communicate to our stakeholders through the disclosures, through our transparency reporting. We have our own rep check that we developed in-house to make sure that we get as many comments from stakeholders as possible. Digital and financial inclusion, connecting the unconnected and closing the digital and financial divide will always be the North Star of the company, as that's an area that we really want to win. We have seen how COVID has brought the digital divide at the forefront in terms of how the world has responded to COVID. People are online, children need education, and the only way we can actually bring these things for our communities is by making sure that we continue to connecting the unconnected. With that, we want to thank the JSE for inviting us to this session today, and we're happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Charles, for that really whirlwind tour of what is essentially a really, really meaningful strategy. I want to start off by saying that having worked with the MTN team, particularly over the last 2 years, I would say, I can personally attest to just how much effort the team has been putting in to driving their strategy and their change. And it's been such an honor and a pleasure to work with you. So it's great to see that, and I'm also very pleased to hear about the impact that the FTSE Russell process has had on not only just driving better disclosure, but in your case, clearly from your presentations, also the action that MTN is taking, because you're delivering tangible results on shifting the dial on sustainability. The targets that you've set are a clear testament to that, and the fact that you've also got executive remuneration linked to those sustainability indicators. I think a number of takeaways there for different companies on the lines, for people aspiring to be like that, and I think for you to show that it can be done with the right will and the intent and the executive leadership. So congratulations to you. And it's really, really great to hear the things that you're doing. I also noted very carefully the impact of the supply chain that you've mentioned.
Correct.
And I think Charles, Charles has mentioned that and explained quite clearly why that's so important, right? And for me, the key takeout there is that this is not a journey that we walk alone, because there are many people that feed into our operations that are part of that supply chain and that we need to engage with and work together with. But that's also part of the influence that one has in actually fundamentally shifting an entire ecosystem by your influence and your intent, right, and your targets. Right. And so it's a very deliberate process, and it's in a process of engagement. So I think that's great. I haven't seen any questions coming through, but maybe I could pose a question, Charles, while we're on the point of supply chain, just to maybe get your reflections on how difficult or easy that has been and the level of buy-in. Because let's face it, net zero 2050 has become a mantra really in the last year or so. And we've seen that happening, but the need to move, of course, is massive. And MTN's ambition of net zero 2040 is even ahead of the climate agreement. So first, maybe you can share with us your intent behind that, but also maybe some of the practical challenges that you may have experienced.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's it's a audacious ambition. But look, when we as the organization said that we will drive ESG at the core, the minute we made that call as EXCO, and we all understood what it meant, it really meant that all of us had to go back into the areas of the business. You know, I had to look at the network, look at the suppliers. We have to look at in the HR space, because ESG is an enterprise-wide issue. It's not necessarily a one segment base. It's not a regulatory issue. It's not a CEO issue. So the first point of call is just how do you mobilize the organization? And we're lucky that I think there's a broad buy-in in the center. There's also a very strong, buy-in, across the CEOs into the markets. And we're also bringing external expertise. What we have done in my organization, we've set up the Project Xaro office or practice, if I could call it. And we brought in KPMG to be the advisor and the implementer for us for the next few years to help us to actualize this. Because we realize that, we need to almost also elevate the level of knowledge within the organization, the cultural shift that is required. You also now have to, again, extend yourself in engagement with your suppliers. Like I said, that most of our network is really run by external parties. So you need to bring them in. That was a challenge in the beginning, but I've always believed that, even themselves, for the sustainability of their own businesses, they will buy into the ambition, and they are now doing that. I think that, one of the key challenges was just in the beginning in terms of how do you mobilize the entire organization? How do you get the holistic level of buy-in from all stakeholders within the business? And then, in the context of Africa, in the markets where we operate, we operate in markets where largely is still very much source of energy, still very much, the challenge for us. So how do you socialize this in the markets like Nigeria? How do you go into Ghana to engage them and to get the level of buy-in? But many of our stakeholders across the markets, whether as regulators, they're all coming on board. We believe we're making progress, in terms of what we believe we'll achieve in terms of ambition. Not easy, but definitely doable.
Thank you, Charles. There's the clarion call. Not easy, but definitely doable. The big difference there, I think, is intent and the executive level buy-in. Yeah. So great takeaways from there, Charles. I'm just watching the chat. I don't see any questions coming in yet. I'm going to encourage the audience. You do have a few minutes in hand. Please take full advantage of asking Nompilo and Charles any questions that you have. It's not often that we will get them in the room together, so we're very grateful for that. Nompilo and Charles, there is a comment on the chat that says, well done to the team for tangible targets. So similar views. So that's coming from Wendy Engel, and that's fantastic on that. So if somebody else wanted to know if the sessions are being recorded and they'll be shared, yes, they will. Okay, so great on that. Maybe I want to ask you, Nompilo, let me move over to you for a second. Gender equality, your 2030 targets are 50-50. And well, congratulations on already being at 38%. So while, of course, that's not where we really want to be, but the fact is that is already notable at this point in time. Yeah. But maybe you can reflect on us some of your journey and perhaps your more detailed plans on being able to get to the 2030 target. And if you can, a little bit of opinion on the stratification, between your sort of board, your EXCO, and the lower levels, your senior leadership. And if you have any plans in that regard, where have you seen your biggest challenges on your road to 2030?
Thanks, Shamila. I think like Charles mentioned, ESG is not an easy journey. It is a journey. It's not a destination. It doesn't end. You have to keep focusing on doing the right things. And the executive support that we're getting in this area has been amazing, because the board and the EXCO, they've realized that gender as well, similar to what we're doing with net zero, if you don't put tangible targets in place, it's just never going to be achievable. You need to be deliberate about it. You need to want to do it, and the intent and the will needs to be there of the organization. And really our EXCO has come into the fore in terms of making sure that we have programs in place. Like, for instance, I've been a member of the program called Rising Leaders, which only focuses on women at a certain level in terms of elevation to bigger positions within the organization. How that's done is that you get exposed to how the company works, you get exposed to senior leadership, you get exposed to the boards, you get exposed to how we actually do things, especially looking at programs that are not in soft areas as well, because We also don't want pink ghettos. We want to make sure that women are elevated in positions of importance as well. We want to see future women CTIOs, taking over from Charles. We want to see MTN has got a female CFO, which is something that we really celebrate as an organization. We also focus a lot in terms of making sure that externally as well in our recruitment and looking at how our communities work, we extend programs that are focused on STEM. From those areas as well, we're able to recruit and we make sure that people come into the organization. Charles always preaches to me that understanding the technology and how the organization works is of utmost importance. And this is something that we're instilling through different programs in the organizations to make sure that we uplift women as much as possible to ensure that they don't only appear at the lowest levels, because what we've seen with most organizations, when we talk about gender diversity and improvement, there's a certain area that keeps growing, but you don't see anything tangible coming through the excos and the boards. And that's why we've picked those two areas to make sure that by 2030, we see significant improvement. So it's something that we have focused on quite significantly going forward. MTN will also be issuing our first gender pay parity type of report so that we're transparent in these issues to show that this is how the organization works. This is how we're treating issues of women. This is how we treat issues of men, so that there is equity, at least around in the workplace. So what encourages us is that in the programs that we've put together for ESG, the targets have been set equally. Like you will see our LTIs, the linkages to ESG, we picked 3 areas, which is Project Xaro, we picked rural connectivity, and the third one is diversity and inclusion. Because if it's important, we have to treat them equally.
Yeah, and Shamila, maybe just to make one point in addition to what Nompilo has said. I mean, like we don't see this as an issue of compliance. We see this as a competitive advantage in essence. So the ESG for us is not a simple thing of saying let's just do a compliance thing. It's really an issue that if we do it well, it positions the organization very well in the market. Even strategically within the organization, there is a lot of competitive advantage that we'll be able to derive by simply enhancing the presence of women in the leadership in technology. That alone will help the organization achieve its goals. So it's really a strategic imperative. It's not just an issue of compliance. Very key, like we say, ESG at the core. It's really much more at the core of how we do things broadly within the organization.
I think that is really hitting the nail on the head, Charles, in relation to culture, because ultimately that's what it is, right? The buy-in is coming and that is changing the culture. And I think that is absolutely critical. So all the aspiring female CTIOs on the call, please contact Charles after this meeting. He's looking for his successor to be groomed.
For sure. For sure.
No, Charles, but thank you. And thank you for putting it out there. And I mean, the fact that, in a space like tech, which is traditionally male dominated, let's admit, to actually have that leadership that is that awakened, that is actually actively looking to change that is certainly commendable. And I think in many instances, in South Africa, we probably do lead in that regard, in taking these things a little bit more seriously. And again, hats off in a male-dominated sector to be able to look at it that way. Nompilo, your reflections have been absolutely amazing in understanding at the granular level the types of programs that you're putting in place and the way in which you're targeting, because that is all the difference. Because you can set up programs with a tick box approach, or you can set up programs saying, I fundamentally understand the issues. Women need to be in the room to listen and to learn. And that's what we're giving them the opportunity to do. And we don't want pink ghettos. I mean, identifying those things are, again, a huge number of absolutely invaluable learnings that I think you have shared with all of us today. So on that note, we have a minute to go. I want to ask you if you have any closing parting shots that you want to share with the audience. Otherwise, we're happy to wrap up.
Yeah, the point I'll make is that for the audience on the call is that MTN is truly committed to the ambition that we have set forward on ESG. We have committed not just only in South Africa, we're committed across all the markets in which we operate. There's a clear buy-in across the stakeholders of our business, whether the chairs of the different boards in the markets in which we operate, whether the CEOs. We're working very closely with the partners and stakeholders whether it's regulatory, or government stakeholders in the different jurisdictions. The program has a lot of support by EXCO, the board. It's operationalized very clearly in terms of scorecards in the business. It is something that we take extremely seriously. Like I said, this for us it will be a strategic lever going forward. So we take it very, very seriously.
Thank you, Charles. And managing that in a multinational in territories that are very different, I think is a challenge, and you're certainly up for it. Thank you. Nompilo?
Yeah. Now, just to add to what Charles has just said, we have learned a lot of lessons through our ESG journey. Like Shamila, you mentioned you've been part of the MTN journey from the onset. We have realized that it takes commitment, it takes intent to succeed. It's something that can't be done as a compliance only. It's a fundamental issue of execution on your strategy. The most sustainable companies you can see by the sustainability strategies they put in place. And it's not a matter of CSI only. It's a matter of making sure that your sustainability strategy is robust enough, it touches on all stakeholder groups, and you're able to execute on it. So we're quite committed to this journey. Like Charles mentioned, we work with various partners. We partner with a lot of governments and regulators and all other stakeholders, and we want to ensure that we impart some knowledge across to other sectors as well. There's a lot that we can learn from mining, for instance, that we can take across to telco. And there's a lot that telcos have learned that they can pass on to mining extractive industries. Because if you look at issues of human rights, particularly that have come to the fore, particularly because of COVID, we've seen that if industries could come together to solve some of the issues, it's much better than one organization going at it alone. So thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you.
Sorry, Charles and Nompilo today. Very grateful for your time. Thank you so much. And we wish you absolutely the best on your onward journey. And I'm looking forward to that 5 out of 5. Thank you. And on that note, we're going to change gears a little bit and move into a different sector altogether. So next up, we're going to have Porsche Bangazrako, who is going to be able to share with you Sanlam's journey. Now, Sanlam, another household name in South Africa to many of us in insurance, and this is the go-to. And we look at that. So Porsche, you have not an easy job in not an easy industry. And have fought the good fights. And Porsche has been working very actively in sustainability in a number of different companies. She's been at Standard Bank and IDC, to name but a few, and passionate leader in this area and executive who has really fought those good fights. Porsche, you are doing this in insurance. Insurance has a critical role to play. There's obviously also the investment side of insurance and a number of different things that you're doing. So it's not immediately obvious to everybody, right, where sustainability intersects in relation to financial services, and particularly in the space you're in a company like Sanlam. So I'm going to hand over to you to enlighten us today. And thank you. We look forward to hearing what you have to share. Over to you, Porsche.
Thank you, Shamila. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having us today. I will share with you a journey that we have, in a way, listening to the MTN story. I think the whole idea of a journey, and I think I will just share with you more about what has happened as we shifted gears in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. But just as a way of introduction, Sanlam is a diversified financial services company. I feel like an advert at the moment. We are very active in South Africa, but we are also active in 33 other countries in the continent, and with some niche existence in developed markets, but also in quite active in India through Shriram. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So in 2020, we had a strategy refresh in the company. And I feel like I am repeating what has been said at MTN. I'm just going to explain how our journey has been. So, with this new strategy, what was quite pleasing and quite important for us is how sustainability, yet again, being seen as a very key lever in seeing through this strategy. So maybe to explain, we have been operating as sustainability within a framework. As you would see, that we've got these 4 clusters, and what we did was more of a very reactive process where we look at how, and through non-financial performance of these different clusters. So what this new strategy, and with sustainability being considered a key lever and expected to integrate, it has created an opportunity for us as a sustainability team or within the group office to now be more proactive, to now bring forth more quite interesting thinking around sustainability. And our challenge really has been to change the way in which sustainability has been operating in the organization. We had been doing well in terms of ratings. We are up there. Governance is very strong in our industry and in our company. But I think on environmental and social, as you manage, many people do not see the immediate link. But what has also happened is that we are at a time of COVID, where we realized how integrated and how connected things are. We saw how health systems were being tested, and how our supply chains have been disturbed, affecting our customers and clients in many different ways. All of this has brought upon in the organization a sensitivity, and especially with our leadership, a more appreciation of sustainability and sustainability issues in seeing through our strategy. So how we see sustainability and how we've seen sustainability is through the lens of resilience. We understand the industry that we are in, that we create opportunities and ensure that our clients are kept safe in terms of, and they stay resilient despite the shocks that have come through. And our starting area has really been looking at our strategic risks. These are our top 10 strategic risks. They have been there. There wasn't much change in the last year, except for the introduction of, I suppose, the COVID-19 pandemic and what it means for our business. But we looked at the risk, which is really the business that we are in, as well as the opportunities. And then we went back to our stakeholders at the beginning of this year. For most parts of the year, we went to our stakeholders to actually query what they consider to be something that is material for our business to thrive. And those insights from stakeholders have been very, very important for us in taking through and rethinking what is our material, what our material themes should be. So we are looking at the moment. Yes, and these are the areas of shared focus. So I must just stress that we are still in the middle of this process. But what has been great has been the quality of conversations that we've had. Like I explained before, it was more, we were working in more of we are in a federated model where there is not a lot of cross-pollination of ideas. And what has happened with this process is that we have had exactly that. And also the kind of engagements that we are having where people appreciate what the client's insights are and what that means in reality with sustainability. When we speak of financial inclusion, how that is going to show up. When we speak of financial literacy, that it's not just sitting somewhere in the group office. So the experience that we've had has been really about how this has been experienced internally. And I think it's quite important that we have done this process in this way, because we have gone through in managing our framework before. This has been the case. But what has changed is that the quality of the conversation and also the opportunity to embed sustainability at the get-go is there. So these are the emergent material themes that have come through from the process that we have taken so far. And we are busy now unpacking each of these boxes with the different clusters and parts of business. And what is interesting is a kind of champions that are coming through, not our usual suspects or people that we've been working dealing with before. But what has happened is that it has also forced us as a sustainability team to re-look at how we position ourselves, to re-look at the language that we use. Also, with a big part of this process has been looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the goals that we have come up with. This process is not finished in any way. We are still busy with it. And again, it has been very interesting to see that while we are unpacking the material issues and the Sustainable Development Goals, we're starting to see the level of ambition that is coming through from business and the level of ambition that wasn't there before. And I think we're quite encouraged by that. And we are hoping that when this process is done, we are able to see more. And I think one of the most interesting things that come out is that last month, Sanlam through Sanlam Investments launched the infrastructure fund, and that's based on the fact that spurring growth in economies is something that's very important, that we say is something that is important in our strategy. But it's not just about having a fund and having it deploy funds. It's also about how those funds are going to be dispersed and the kind of things, or environmental and social and governance issues that we are going to be looking at as a result of that fund. So it's interesting times ahead, and I'm quite encouraged by what is happening. There are quite a number of areas in which we can show and we can show that there's been a change. But I think what has been quite interesting in terms of the stakeholder insights, as the partners before have said this, what our stakeholders are saying is that we understand that you're financially resilient. We appreciate your size in the market and all of those things. But what we want to see is how you show that resilience for the whole community, for your bigger impact. I think this has actually also just queried us to look as we go through these different changes in the company and our culture, and also showcasing some of the brilliant things that we have done. I mean, one of the things that one of the funds that we've got is the Climate Fund which raised about $850 million US, and this was focused on renewable energy specifically. And this fund, we're now going to have Climate Fund 2, Investor 2, and this will be looking specifically on water, sanitation projects, as well as oceans, something that and how these funds are deployed and the kind of impact that we have is going to be quite important. As we go through this journey, I mean, we are looking at KPIs. We are looking at, the way forward on ensuring that areas such as executive remuneration are also aligned. We just go into the picture before. Sorry about that. The picture before is really part of a program that we're very proud of, that we've been involved in with the WWF mostly on freshwater projects. And I think when we look into this, and I think as sustainability professionals, as companies as well, with ESG area, everybody asking, investors asking pertinent questions, it's very easy to be drawn to the idea of the taps are empty. I'm now using the day zero. This picture is on the headwaters of the area that supplies Cape Town. And I think I just thought that I would leave this as a way to look at sustainability. One of the things that we've learned from our partner, the WWF, has been about, let's look at the water source areas. And when the day zero issue was happening, we were focused at the dam levels. We were focused at the taps that were drying. However, the solution is really in embedding sustainability in what we do. And by focusing in these areas, which are the freshwater areas, and removing alien species and ensure that they are conserved, you ensure that you show value for society, for your stakeholders, for a much longer, and you stay resilient. And I just put this here for us to always think about, because sometimes these ideas, and I'm going to quote one of my colleagues, these ideas are so far-fetched, are so airy-fairy. I do not understand that as an actuary, what does it mean for me? But suddenly, when I'm faced with these kind of explanations, I can see where I fit in and I can come up with solutions. So it's been an interesting journey. It is an interesting journey. What is assuring us is the fact that we are bringing a lot more of our colleagues with us. We are working internally to ensure that there's an understanding, and then we're pushing forward this, and it will show up in our reports. And hopefully by then we would have ambitions as strong as our other partners, but that are very much rooted on what is material for our sustainability. And with that, I hand over back to you, Shamila.
Thank you very, very much. That was very quick but very succinct, and I think also giving us a great insight into how this works in relation to insurance and the insurance industry. I'm looking again to see if we have any comments on there. No, nothing, no comments so far. So I'm going to encourage again the audience.
Sorry, Shamila. There was a question about will Sanlam be undertaking TCFD reporting? Yes, we are preparing for our first report, and I think this has been a very interesting thing to take through as we are going through a strategy sort of refresh as an organization, and that there has been a level of awareness and also the level of working together internally. It will be a starter report, but I think it's something that is there, and what encourages me is the quality of conversations that are being had. But yeah.
Interesting, and I think you've reflected on some of that even in your previous in the slides, right? When you're talking about how the issues have been developed, the level of engagement you're having, and what you called about not the usual suspects that have been involved in part of the conversation. So hopefully that bodes well for organization-wide permeation of the issues and the understanding and things like that, and the ability to actually make it understandable. I think, quite often, there's so many, firstly, there's misunderstanding as to what sustainability is or isn't. And then you're kind of trying to dive into getting people on board on the agenda. While we're waiting for any other questions, and I'm just going to have a look at the chat again, nothing immediately. I want to ask you a little bit about the materiality analyses that you pointed to. When I looked at the chart, what was interesting for me is that your arrows were either going up or there were no change, which sort of says to me immediately that those issues are prevalent and they are increasing. There isn't a kind of like this is a trend and it's going to go away. It was like these things are there to stay, and in many instances, the level of relevance is actually increasing. Do you want to maybe speak to us just a little bit more about that materiality process? And I think perhaps things that might have surprised you in the conversation when you're doing the materiality discussions. If we're in the South African context in particular, and if we're thinking about the reporting that permeates our market, we're thinking about integrated reporting, which listed companies need to consider because of the King codes being embedded in the JSE listings requirements. This issue of materiality and using the materiality process to surface your key issues is obviously a critical one. So maybe you can give us a little bit of insight about how you approach that, and perhaps what was most noteworthy for you as you undertook that process and listened to your stakeholders.
Okay, so I mean that the risk part is something that is done internally, and it's being driven very much from a risk process. But I think working with a wider group, a multi people coming from different parts of the organization, what was interesting is that we actually saw the interconnectedness of the risks, and how whether the risk is seen to be ongoing and some increasing, we started having this discussion about what if these two risks collide? What if you have a situation where you have an employee or a workforce that is highly stressed, and there are well-being issues, and there are all these things that need to go. What does the growth in the company? What does it mean to the growth in a company? So I think it was just the way in which we looked at the risks together with the insights that are coming through, whether it's coming from the Edelman Trust, it's bringing that to people who maybe had not seen those reports, and suddenly you're thinking, oh, so this is the role of the company. These are the expectation. It's not just about a pocket of the company there that is looking at transformation, but this actually does have it was the connectedness and the sudden light bulbs coming through for many of us, and also for us to also appreciate that I called it naming things, how we call things. So for some people, material themes is not quite working, and sometimes they want to call it something else, and so we needed to be flexible, because that's what works for people in the organization. So it was a learning and unlearning, and maybe relearning for some of us, but it was just a process where we've got something that has been ongoing for a while. However, there's now a step change in how, and also an opportunity for a much wider conversation within the organization.
Fantastic. So actually the process has driven a lot of that broader engagement and serves the double kind of purpose of being awareness creation as well, which I think is great. So that's actually a good reflection on how the process actually enables the right kind of behavior change and then an awareness, as we've mentioned. Porsche, I do see that there's another question in the chat.
Yes.
I'll read it out so the audience can also hear. It says, thanks, Porsche, really insightful. How do you link executive pay, which is often short-term based, to these long-term objectives of realizing shared value? So they wanted to know, do you set 5, 10, 15-year, perhaps clawback provisions? So please, whatever insight you can share on that would be helpful. Thank you, Porsche.
All right. I think I have a very quick question, is that we are starting this conversation internally. And what is interesting is that we are looking at the studies like the ones that have been done by PwC to inform our thinking on how exactly we go about this. And I think with the conversations that are being had, I think as we go on, and we are also looking to our peers and speaking to other companies as well to see how do they go about with this. What is good is that we've given some kind of a sort of an amber light to say this is coming through, and this is a discussion that is going to be had. And so it's something that we would have to think about on how exactly it's going to be realized. But that is something that we have on our plates to do.
Okay, so thank you. So the answer to that, for anybody interested, I think is one that many of us can really relate to, and that it's a journey and we're starting and we know the things that need to come, and so those would be on the agenda going forward. Porsche, there's another question there, wondering if you could outline the process Sanlam is going through with respect to assessing climate exposure.
Okay. Can I just say that it's a very difficult process, because of the first things that we had to just to remind ourselves is that even though we are in the tertiary industry, we have to actually have a different way in which we assess our portfolios. And as a sustainability person, I'm a bit wary of now going into the portfolio management area, but we are at the starting blocks. We are getting assistance from specialists. There is a lot of desktop studies that we are looking at of how we could look into assessing the climate exposure. And that is why at the moment we have not come out with any ambition or how we are going to be looking at things. What is clear though is that we are going to take an approach that is looking at how we can have positive outcomes. We are part of the Just Transition program that the NVI is spearheading, and looking at how we are going to be, in at the moment. I think what I can assure you is that we are looking at our portfolios to understand our climate exposure at the moment. That's what we are looking at. How we are going to do the risk and scenario analysis. That is something that is the next step. And I can tell you that there are people who are going to be splitting hairs. It's interesting that John is posing this question, because that's actually an area that possible collaboration on how do you manage this task, and that's what we're busy with, is trying to understand it for ourselves, and then how we are going to approach it, because we understand the impact that this would have, particularly in the investment space.
Thank you, Porsche. And I think also just, broadly for anyone interested, that there's a fair amount of work that's happening more at the national level within the financial sector. So there's the Climate Risk Forum, and Porsche, I think, is at the back of her head anyway, because it's a given that that's happening. So just on that level, there's a Climate Risk Forum that is working for the financial sector, that is chaired by National Treasury, looking broadly across the market about the issues of risk, trying to understand that, and then and figuring out what we need to do broadly as a sector in financial services in assessing and addressing some of these within the real economy as well. So there is a fair amount of work going on there, and part of those outputs and deliverables are coming out as we speak, and that will start informing broader changes, in terms of policy within the country and things like that. So just to rest assured that those things are being looked at. For example, the Reserve Bank is part of a group that's looking at scenarios, understanding, and being able to do that at a national level for the country as well, and that will help companies to be able to assess those risks a little bit better with the local context consideration. Can I just see if there are any other comments on the line? Nothing more. Okay. Porsche, maybe, okay, no other questions so far. I can see from the platform. Porsche, maybe a personal reflection on your journey. You have worked in the space for a fairly long time now, some of that in financial services. What would you say would be the catalyst for this uptick in interest that we've seen? I'm going to say particularly in the last 2 years. We know that the imperatives have been there for a long time, but the interest, the uptick, the sense of urgency, I think we can see a palpable change. And like I said, I'm going to say the last 2 years, maybe give or take. What are your reflections on that, being long-standing in this area?
Yeah, no, I sometimes bounce between it's extremely noisy in the space at the moment, but then I would like to take the high road of saying that, to see this level, this momentum that's coming through, and to see the kind of questions and that are being asked by investors. It used to be, especially in the investment part, it used to be you can fill in this form and we'll come back with a rating. It's now about, we saw this in this newspaper clipping, we want to understand what is it that you're doing. So I think the level of interest and the kind of, there is I see a positive, a possibility for positive. And I think it's also starting to mean that it's going to stop being the sustainability team's role. I think we're going to be more overseeing the changes. And I mean, I think there's still some, because it could just be an issue of it's a fire, but it's like it's papers and it could die down. We need to keep the momentum. We need to deepen the conversation. And I think actually the fact that, the people that are talking openly about, okay, so this is going to be my key performance, my KPIs. And so what does this mean? And how can I see this through? And so that for me gives me an idea that, we're going to have data that we trust going forward. And we're also just going to have a generally more positive way of working rather than to be reactive to what's happening.
Yeah, thank you, Porsche. I don't see any more questions, and that was great. I think, also brave of you to step up and share with us the journey, some of it early, some of it a little bit more established. So we're very grateful for that. And I think there's a lot of learnings for anybody on this journey from what Porsche has shared with us today. There's certain areas that will be more advanced, others that less, but you need to continue on that journey, and you have to get that engagement. Listening to your stakeholders is critically important, and being aware that that these conversations are ongoing, but the action that needs to follow is becoming more and more often imperative, because people are asking those questions now, and that is certainly becoming a lot more visible. So Porsche, seeing as we don't have any more questions, which means you did a great job, I think, we will leave you to it and let you go about the rest of your day. And thank you very much for joining us today and sharing those really helpful insights in such an honest and heartfelt way, which I think would have resonated with many people. Thank you. Okay, and so after that, we have another session now, again changing gear to a very different kind of business, which is in retail. And that, of course, is none other than Woolworths. Now, Woolworths is a household name to many, many people. Woolworths also, in many instances, has the face of being the sustainable brand. This is not something that has happened by accident. This has been many, many years of a very concerted, very focused effort to shift the dial on these areas. And joining us today is Woolworths Group Head of Sustainability, Feroz Koor. Feroz, welcome. And it is an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you here today. I've obviously had the opportunity over different times to interact and engage with you.
Thank you, Shamila.
And so absolutely honored to have you here today. I think I don't want to spend too much time because there must be people eagerly hanging on to hear everything about what sits behind the brand of Woolworths. But just before I do that, a little bit of introduction to Feroz himself. So Feroz has worked within sustainability at, I think, 3 top 40 companies in the last 10 years and headed this portfolio of sustainability. So himself, I think, seen a lot, heard a lot, been there, done that. And now, of course, been integrally involved in Woolworths with the Vision 2025 plan on sustainability and their strategy. So Feroz, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. I think we're all eagerly awaiting to see what comes next and what tasty treat you have lined up for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamila. Morning, everybody. It's a really pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invitation and allowing us to share some of our story with you and with the audience today. So, I'm just reflecting on what's been shared today and so far by my colleagues that came before me, and there's just so much that resonates, and just in terms of the language used and processes that have been followed and so on, and it's heartening to see the level of engagement and interest and effort that companies are putting in the space. So tell you a little bit about our journey to date. So as you indicated, many people are familiar with who Woolworths is. We are a retail organization in the food, fashion, beauty, and homeware space. We're based in South Africa. We operate in 13 countries. Our 3 main operating divisions are Woolworths South Africa, Country Road Group, and David Jones. And yeah, we operate, as I said, we have about 1,400 store locations. As a business, we at a holding company level, the vision of this business is to be one of the world's most responsible retailers. Now that sounds, what does that mean? I don't question what it means. What I take from it is that it's almost our North Star for the programs that have in place to operate as a responsible business. So what I like about the fact of this vision is that it's not the sustainability department's division, or it's not a division of a team. It's the actual vision of the company that's listed on the JSE. And I think, it's quite a brave vision to have. It's been in place for a few years because it challenges the business not just to look at itself, but to look beyond itself and say, how do we operate at a level that is world class, and how do we use this as guiding principles for us and everything that we do. So it's very much like we heard speakers come before us, is that sustainability is not something that somebody does in a business. And how we define it at Woolworths is it's how we operate. Whatever we do, whether it's sourcing food or fashion or beauty or running our stores, whatever, sustainability needs to be embedded in it. I just have the role of pulling a lot of this together, but ultimately the delivery and operations of sustainability belongs to the entire organization. And so having this vision is a reflection of the level of importance the business plays on being a responsible organization. Now, a lot of it stems from, it goes back a long time. Before there was formal sustainability programs in place, before anybody was using the language of sustainability, it goes to the ethos of the business, which was very much based on values. It's a very strong values-driven organization, going way back to its founding in 1931. And so through that, you find that the organization is imbued very richly with a sense of how do we operate responsibly, and it's the way to do it. We're not going to operate in any other way. There's no other way to run this business, but in a responsible manner. The sustainability program we have is just is an articulation of that. So to go back a bit in history and to talk about our program to date. So having said what I said about this going back to, really back the founding of the organization and it's being values driven, in order to give it some level of structure and form, back in 2007, the business developed a formal sustainability program. And the name, interestingly, the word has been used in both presentations that came before us, the word journey. So the name of our program at Woolworths from 2007 is the Good Business Journey, or what we call it for short, GBJ. And in it, the name implies that this is something that never ends. We always got to be on this program of self-improvement. And so we officially launched it and adopted this program in 2007, knowing that whatever was the way of operating the company in, almost the unspoken way of all unwritten rules needed some kind of form and structure. And so articulation of a set of goals and commitments and targets and some areas to focus on, and really between 2007 and 2010, it was a period of understanding what does this mean, what are the areas that we need to be operating in. 2010 to 2015, there was a relook at the program and its goals and its focus areas, expanded the number of areas that it was focusing on from 4 to 8 as it understood more the impact across the business. It was really a time of embedding that within the Woolworths business itself, Woolworths being the Woolworths operating company. Between 2015 and 2020, we entered what we call probably phase 3 of our GBJ program. And this was very much about taking it to the rest of the group. So I mentioned that we operate in Australia and the rest of in many other African businesses, in many other African countries. And it was about how do we take this and embed it across the group. It's the first time we also went out externally with commitments and targets. So we didn't just keep them internally, but we went externally as well. And really held ourselves accountable to a set of really ambitious and stretching targets. There were some really difficult ones which caused a lot of internal engagement and conversations, but which we're very proud of and which resulted in a lot of what we see today in terms of our performance and the goals and commitments and the kind of achievements that we've achieved we've managed to see. And then coming to the end of the 2020 cycle, we certainly had to look forward again. And given that we've had this 5-year, probably discipline of really looking at our strategy, we looked at it to 2025 and beyond. But before I go there, let me just talk a little bit about how the governance and management of sustainability at Woolworths. So, firstly, important to note that. And I started with the vision of the organization, that sustainability is one of the key enablers of the overall strategy. So at holdings at WHL level, there's 6 pillars to the overall strategy of the business. One of them is what we call GBJ, or sustainability. So it's fundamental to the business and to how the business operates. From an oversight perspective, then over and above the statutory social and ethics committee, we in addition have a dedicated sustainability subcommittee of the board. It's a full proper subcommittee, fully constituted, chaired by an independent non-executive director, attended by many of the non-executive directors, as well as the group CEO, the group chair, the group CFO, the group COO, and by invitation, a number of the senior management and executive of the organization. So it's a proper fully constituted subcommittee of the board over and above the social and ethics committee, dedicated to looking specifically at our sustainability strategy and performance. From a management perspective, what we do is that we set targets internally. So I mentioned that, we really looked at our strategy every 5 years. But over and above that, below that, we set KPIs and targets with every operating company and every business unit, particularly in Woolworths being so large, each of the operating units. And these targets span 1 to 5 years, but they were on 5-year scorecards. So they revisited annually, but the targets are measured twice a year. We report internally twice a year. We've got our own system and tools for measuring performance and scoring each of the business units in each of the businesses. The outcome of those processes is fed back into each of the leadership teams, all the excos of each of the operating companies, and then it's taken to the board sustainability committee twice a year for them to get oversight of how each of the businesses are performing. In addition, we have internal sustainability reviews with every company and business unit, where the leadership of each business unit plays back the performance over the last 6 months against their scorecard, highlights and lowlights, and forecasts what they're going to be doing for the next 6 months. And in addition, we tie in these scorecards into the overall, these KPIs into the overall scorecards of the businesses, so that the business performance is linked to sustainability performance as well. So very strong integration of governance and oversight. So coming back to our latest iteration of our strategy, I mentioned that in our last set of targets and goals were out to 2020. So late in 2019, the third quarter of 2019, we started reviewing where do we want to go next. We knew we needed to keep the discipline of the 5-year cycle, but we also knew that given everything that was going on in the world, this was all just pre-COVID. But everything else, if you think back to the climate strikes, the school kids, Greta's movement on climate, Extinction Rebellion, there was just so much happening around that time, and we realized that we needed to take a really deep look at where we wanted to go for the next 5 years, and understand, is it just for 5 years, or do we want to take a bigger view? And so we framed a code word for the strategy of the project. We called it Vision 2025, and we said, okay, let's forecast to 2025 where we want to take this program and maintain the trajectory that we've had, but also accelerate given what's going on around us. So that led to a significant piece of work, which was disrupted by COVID, but continued once we found our feet, where we did significant reviews of what was going on globally and locally. So we did desktop reviews. We understood what was going on from peer companies, what best practice was globally, irrespective of which industry it is. We looked at retail industry. We looked at both food and fashion industries. We looked beyond that. We looked at telecoms, mining, financial services, tech, to look at what best in class was. We looked at global initiatives that were underway. We looked carefully at the SDGs and Global Compact, other international initiatives. We did a significant amount of stakeholder engagement, both internally and externally, spoke to all the leadership, spoke to external stakeholders, suppliers, NGOs, academics, and investors. We did a deep dive into a broad sense of what is the state of the world, what are we picking up, what are we seeing our stakeholders talking about. And in so doing, we articulated or we captured a lot of what we were finding, and we populated it initially onto a big spreadsheet and we realized we identified over 140 issues that were of relevance to us, either as an organization or as a retailer. And that these are the kind of things that make you realize that as a business, that sustainability is not something that somebody does in a team somewhere in the business while your business operates. That all of this is absolutely fundamental to who you are and how you operate, and how we have been operating all these years, given the vision that we have, given the kind of integration of oversight and so on. But that we need to refresh this view every now and again. We need to keep our finger on the pulse. We need to understand where the world is going. And an interesting thing was that a lot of what we found, or what we picked up, as I mentioned, we started this process pre-COVID, was actually reinforced during the COVID time around where society was going, the kind of issues, what the expectation of corporates were, the heightened awareness of our role as as people, as organizations, our impact on the environment. If you cast your mind back to the early part of lockdown, COVID, there was this whole sense of nature's recovering. Polluted cities were suddenly becoming cleaner. Waterways were clearing up. It was all around this. It was reinforcing a lot of what stakeholders and what our reading was, what was telling us, our research was telling us. Obviously, you can't focus on 140 issues with the same level of impact. So we had to go through a materiality assessment process, and that's where we took the feedback from our stakeholders, and we took all of this into internal workshops and really deep dive with the leadership teams across the business as to how do we interpret this and what are the key material things for us. But interestingly, besides just the issues, like energy or renewable energy or fleets or whatever, I mean, we went really deep dive. We also started picking up what is the trends and sentiments we're finding. What are the things that might not be said, but if you start taking a macro view, you pull out the sentiment in the trend, and all of this was used to feed into the process we're doing, and was very valuable in our workshop processes. In addition to what we saw on the previous slide, where we looked at the issues, and we said what people might not be using this language, but you're picking up these things. So things around the continuous move towards conscious consumerism, right? People want to know what they're buying, where they're buying it from, where did it come from. Youth advocacy, I mentioned Extinction Rebellion or the movement that Greta started and so on. But we know throughout history that revolutions always started by the young people, right? And youth advocacy is an important thing for us, we feel, because it's an indication of what the young people are going to be driving the change, right? But they're also going to be your future employees, they're going to be your future suppliers, they're going to be your future customers, they're going to be your future regulators. And so it's important to hear what they say. And so those are some strong signals coming from that area. An expectation for companies to take a stand on issues that matter. Given everything that's going on, if you look down the slide, you'll see we picked up, this, or we were just reflecting, and these are not, a lot of it is just obvious stuff, but we just were putting it down on a page. Is, globally, we were seeing lots of nationalism in political space, populism, a lot of political fragmentation happening, all allies, moving apart from each other. And in that vacuum, there was a strong sense that companies need to be stepping up a little bit. Society was looking at large corporates as with more sense of a sense of taking leadership over governments in some sense. If you again cast your mind back to the strong positions, for example, Nike took with Colin Kaepernick, where it was unpopular at the time, but it paid off over time when people started stepping up and saying, well, okay, actually, that was the right thing to do, and expecting companies to be saying, are you on the right side of history or not? Obviously, it can go a bit overboard when it becomes, I guess, playing to the crowd and corporates suddenly jumping on every bandwagon out there just because they feel it's the right thing to do. But I think the sense of doing the right thing is very important. And a counterpoint to what I just said about fragmentation in the political arena is what we also picked up is strong sense of collaboration. There's a feeling that you need to be working together. You can't be doing things on your own. And in fact, when you work in the space, you realize that given the scale and scope of things, that we have to be working jointly on together on issues on both risks and opportunities and the solutions. We are in many cases the cause of most of the problems. We need to be working jointly on the solutions. I spoke about consumer awareness, impact of, in our case, looking at fashion industry, for example, is fast fashion. I spoke about business leading, and then collaboration and global agreement. So again, counterpoint to political fragmentation is global agreement on things in the sustainability space. So we've got the SDGs as at probably the pinnacle, being the overarching set of sustainability related goals and commitments, but there was just so many other initiatives coming up. So if you look sectorally, in our case, in retail, particularly in food retail, packaging is a huge issue. So global commitments around packaging, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, globally leading. So we were the first African retailer to sign up to the global commitment on packaging. Then sub-regional falling under that. So things like plastic pacts, where you work, again, it talks to collaboration and so on. But a lot of agreements in the water space, under the CEO Water Mandate of United Nations Global Compact. There's a new initiative called the Water Resilience Coalition, again, with the first African organization, company to join that, leading companies working globally on looking at supply chain, water issues in the supply chain. So a lot of, underneath the SDGs, there's a significant move to collaborative platforms on sustainability issues. So these are some of the themes that we're feeding back into the business to say, okay, we're looking at our new strategy, we're looking forward. These are the issues, but these are the trends and sentiments that are also out there. And how do we take these into account? And how do we build them into what we're doing? We also just mapped a little bit, and this is not a complete list, it's just some set of issues. When you look at some of the issues that we're talking about, particularly, so when we did the materiality assessment, obviously climate change comes out on top, over and above everything else. But in our case, besides climate change, there were supply chain issues, packaging issues, sourcing, farming, water, biodiversity. A lot of these issues that we were saying, these are the things that materially drive what we ultimately doing and that we need to be integrating. But and so how do you understand it, the impacts on the value chain? And just to understand how diverse this is and how integrated it is, that it's fundamentally core to your business, that if you start looking back at what potentially these issues can have, do we look at potential shipping delays because of changing weather patterns, excessive storms? So suddenly you're already seeing where storms become too violent, ships can't leave their ports or can't dock in Cape Town, for example, or Durban, because storms last longer than they used to, or the shifting patterns and so on. To customer and employee health, issues around animal welfare, customer sentiment, very, very important. I mean, a simple example, when Australia had its severe wildfires a year and a half ago, so there's significant risk to and disruption of supply chain. There's physical risk to your infrastructure. Stores can burn down and so on. Then your customers get impacted. So then there's the customer impact of people's homes being burned down and so on. And so how does that impact everything? And then, but just pure sentiment, where people weren't impacted directly and stores weren't impacted directly, but people chose not to spend their money in retail environments because they said, let us donate to the firefighters, let's donate to people who are being impacted by wildfires and so on. And so it's realizing that these concepts, which are almost nebulous when you say climate change, you say biodiversity loss and so on. Okay, so how do we bring this down to what it potentially means for you as an organization? And what does it mean for how it will impact your trade or your position going forward? So it's fundamentally important to translate that language we found of climate change, water scarcity, all of this into business language and understanding impact on value chains. And so in going through this process and feeding into the organization, we then also went back, we also agreed with the leadership to say, okay, we've got a history of setting big, bold, ambitious targets, really, really stretching targets. But let's agree on some principles ahead of setting a new set of targets so that we're all on the same page. And so we engaged significantly internally again and agreed with the leadership that our new set of goals will have to be ambitious. Like we used to having ambitious goals, that we be clear that we're not going to come with soft goals. They're going to be long-term. So as much as we're in a 5-year cycle, there are going to be some goals that you need to get your head around that need to be longer than that. So there's now going to be goals that we might come and propose to you that are 20 or even 30 years out. Very long-term cycles. I mean, there's some question, is it feasible to have those kind of goals? But on the other hand, if you're not setting those kind of trajectories, you're not going to make the kind of change you need. That we need to be driving innovation, that we need collaboration, that science and context-based targets are preferable. So we set our science-based target, and they need to be aligned with global collective action initiatives. And so ultimately, it brought us to a set of goals where we have a process which has 3 overarching pillars, looking at our environmental impact, our supply chain impact, and then a huge piece on social impact, which we call inclusive justice, which is a work in progress. But just touching on some of the goals we've already set, which we've signed off, net zero to 2040. Glad to hear MTN have that same goal, and we'd be keen to engage with them on some of commonalities in that space. 100% renewable energy by 2030. and the water positive impact by 2050. This is the Water Resilience Coalition I spoke about, which is a leading piece of work in that space. We're looking at regenerative agriculture, circularity in our supply chain transparency. So we're going to be publishing our fashion and beauty supply lists later this year. And a number of others. And these are all supported by, these are what we call our high-level goals, and these are supported by over 200 KPIs internally, which we drive and we use to measure and track our performance. So I'm going to stop there and say, if you need any more information, go to our Woolworths Holdings website, click on sustainability, download our latest report and all the appendices, and you'll find much more to read about our program there. That's me.
Thank you, Feroz. Just very easy, such simple things that you're doing at Woolworths. But thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I think such an involved strategy, so many things that you've highlighted there that are critical insights. I've written down so many of them. I want to particularly note for companies the issue of governance and governance on the embedding of sustainability within the practices of the business, right? And how that cascades through the various divisions, what you've put in place to enable that, I think is critically important, so that it allows, across the business for people to take responsibility, but also to have visibility. It's a theme that I saw come through with Sanlam and with MTN as well. But with Woolworths, of course, because of the way your journey has taken, is actually even more critical in a complex business across so many different jurisdictions as well. So that was very noteworthy. I'm going to encourage the audience. This is a fantastic opportunity to ask questions of most people's favorite neighborhood brand, whether it's in fashion, whether it's in the food space, to see what, if there's anything you would like to know, any burning questions. Feroz is not dealing with any customer complaints today, but he's happy to take your sustainability questions. And Feroz, with that, the other things that I noticed when you're speaking about, when you talked about the trends that you've picked up as a group, the ones that you're tracking, and the need to translate that into business language and into business impact was absolutely critical. And I think the practical examples you gave of how you would take a mega issue and say, well, what does that mean for me? And how does that impact my business? Is, for me, at the crux of anything in relation to sustainability. One of the big challenges we have is translating the language of sustainability into meaningful business understanding and then bottom line impact. Usually that's not so easy when many of the issues are manifesting in the longer term. And part of that has been the journey that we've seen in sustainability up to now. So we know what the issues are, but because they manifest in the longer term, and generally our models have an entrenched short-termism, there's a disconnect. And so the urgency to act is often not there. I would like to ask your reflection on perhaps, and I know you came into Woolworths a few years ago and the journey started perhaps a little bit before you, but what is your sense coming into this business that makes this part of the DNA of the business, the ability to see the longer term and make the decisions now that might only have payback in 5 years or 10 years time? What is that? What is the difference in a business like Woolworths that you think is the key factor?
Yeah, look, I think firstly, it is important for companies to be doing that. It's a good question. One, it goes back again, as I said, to the ethos of the company. It's a very values-driven company. So what is the right thing to do? It's not just what should we be doing, but it's how should we be doing it as well. So what is the right way of us doing this? And so it's about asking questions beyond, taking a broader view as to what you're trying to achieve. If we're launching a product range, it's not what is the product, how is the product sourced, where is it sourced from. So it's part of the entire cycle of thinking of the business and being a product, a retailer, private label, product development cycles, all of that, take these into account. Two is that the ownership of it needs to live with the operational parts of the business. So when I give an example, our role centrally is to guide the business to act as a bit of a sense of excellence, also to act as a bit of an internal part of the business to challenge everybody. Are you doing enough? We have lots of tough conversations internally and criticize our colleagues for not doing enough, and they push back and so on. But we see it as a healthy tension that needs to exist in this space. But ultimately, our role is to say, let's assist you and enable you to deliver what you got to deliver. So a key example, and something we're very proud of, I think it just went out yesterday, is, for example, in our fashion business, we've just hit a milestone of 100% responsibly sourced cotton. Now, percentage-wise, volume-wise, we're not the biggest cotton buyer in the world. But percentage-wise, 100% responsibly sourced cotton, according to the leading international standards, places us with the best in class globally. Right? We're up there with, we're higher than H&M. So we're one of the few companies in the world globally that are 100% responsibly sourced cotton. But when we started the journey 5 years ago, when we set the target to 100% sourced cotton, quite a lot of internal tough discussions, right?
Yeah.
But the delivery of it belongs to the buying groups, the cotton buyers. So now that we've set the target, it's to understand that where is the industry going and why are we setting those targets? So the long-term thinking is also to understand where is the world going? What is the impact in our supply chain? What does responsible cotton buying mean? We know that cotton is a water-heavy crop. We know that production uses lots of land. We know that there's a lot of dyeing that happens. In the dyeing process, there's pollution that goes. So traditionally, do you need to work with the proper dye houses? We know that there's human rights issues on farms. And so saying, if we say we are a values-driven organization and we want to do things the right way, then we need to be addressing all of these things. And so sourcing cotton means we also have to address human rights issues. So you need to work with farmers who are paying a fair wage, who don't have forced labor. We need to be ensuring that the mills or the dye houses aren't polluting. The mills aren't employing people they shouldn't. So that's the whole. And so the long-term thinking is to say the right thing to do is this. So let's set a trajectory and path in order to do it. But also staying in touch with what's going on in the world and what your stakeholders are saying. Customers want to know where the products are coming from. Forecasting and doing the kind of work I spoke about, and understanding where sentiment is, where's the world going. So it's about continuously keeping, I think, a responsible business. We see these things, and Shamila, you JC might have said it before, that sustainable companies with strong sustainability programs tend to perform better. And I don't think it's because they're sustainability programs. I think it's because they take a bigger view of the world. They're just more open to, and they're taking into account much more of the issues that impact them and that they impact on. And so it's about just running your business with a broader lens, essentially, with a broader sense of awareness of what's going on out there.
It's good management practice, and good management practice usually is that key that gives you better performance in the long run, because your business is just better run. It's able to be more resilient. It's able to think differently. And those are the things that investors want anyway. And ultimately is really the proxy for better performance in the longer term. Feroz loved the example of the sustainably sourced cotton. I can't wait to go get my next sustainably sourced cotton product at Woolworths. It's wonderful to see that. I must say, over time, personally, I've been quite conscious about wanting those sort of products and specific about where I buy them, where I find the labels that can verify that is the case. So happy to see homegrown world leadership in relation to that, and of course the massive impact that is going to have, because you're setting the tone for others to follow, and congratulations on that. I feel like we could ask you for many more fantastic examples that are so relatable, but I am conscious of time. So very grateful for your wonderful insights, Feroz, and for making that so practical, so tangible, and so relatable. So even if one isn't that advanced on this journey, I think what you shared with us is exceptionally helpful because it is so relatable. And wishing Woolworths all the best on this journey. And I'm hoping that we're going to see more and more accolades coming down the line very soon. So thank you so much, Feroz, and all the best to you.
Thank you very much thank you for inviting us. Really enjoyed it.
Have a great day. Bye. Thank you very much, Feroz, and the team at Woolworths for all your fantastic efforts. And on to our last, but definitely not least, company showcasing today. We have the great honor and privilege of having the CEO of Xaro joining us today. Now, many of you will know that Xaro has consistently actually been a very good performer in relation to sustainability in its ratings overall, has shifted the dial over a number of years, has obviously dealt with very critical sustainability challenges in relation to the fact that they're part of the core value chain, that they're very ingrained in a business that has fundamentally been seen as kind of anti-sustainable, but has managed to change its perspective, its view, its actions and operations fairly drastically over a fairly short period of time. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome today Xaro's CEO, Mxolisi Mgojo, who is going to join us today to take us through their sustainability journey. Mxolisi, it's not every day that we have a CEO taking us through a sustainability journey. So we are deeply honored to have you today. I don't want to mind with any further ado except to say that, you know, your background, your experience is across the board. You've been in banking, you've been in financial services, you're in mining for a long time, you're in the resources space. And certainly a lot to teach us, you know, your own background, even in, you know, computer science and things like that, really multifaceted. You're probably the epitome of the new generation 4IR type character, but in an industry that is very interesting and that it has huge imperative to change. And Xaro has certainly been a leader. Mxolisi, I hand over to you to take us through your journey today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamila, for the introduction, and really it is an honor and a pleasure for me to be here today. And for us, you know, we don't take these moments very lightly, but we take the whole issue of sustainability quite seriously as an organization. Now, I'm not a sustainability expert. I mean, I've been listening to the previous presenters, and I really felt very underqualified to be going to the depth of sustainability in the manner that they have. But nonetheless, these are the issues that we have had to deal with over the number of years as an organization. And we have, I think, to a large extent, excelled in these particular areas of sustainability. Mine is just to probably set a context of of our business. As you've said, that we are a resources business, a business that really has to deal with a vast issues in terms of its own sustainability of its existence into the future. We are a business that operates within communities. We impact communities in vast manners. We disturb land, we rehabilitate land, we open mines, we close mines, we extract water, we do all sorts of what could be deemed and perceived as being very negative to the environment. And so therefore, with that in mind, and also given the fact that as Xaro, we are predominantly known as a coal mining company. Yes, we do mine coal. We are the largest producers of coal in the country, the largest sellers of coal to Eskom. But we are a business that has been very conscious about our future from a long time ago, as far back as during the time of the previous CEO, Sipho Nkosi, when in that instance, I was still running coal business. And I was playing a lot of activities in terms of marketing coal into the European markets and later on into the Asian markets. And in that period, as we were selling coal into those markets, we began to see a transition that was taking place within the whole coal value chain, whereby predominantly our market was beginning to shift, our customer base was beginning to shift from not only burning coal for a source of energy, but we're also beginning to go into renewables. So in that instance, as far back as 2009, as an organization, we started really understanding this imperative that was emerging. And then at that point in time, we started investigating as to how we ourselves as Xaro can get into renewable energy. And with that, in 2012, we actually entered into a joint venture with Tata Power to create a company, a subsidiary called Synergy, which then bidded into the RIP windows of the renewable energy program of the government in window 2. And we ended up actually developing 2 wind farms, which are in the Eastern Cape, to a total of 229 megawatts. We then, in 2019, bought out the 50% of Tata to end up owning 100% of renewable assets as a coal mining company, which many people thought at the time we were crazy when we started on this journey as to, that's a real dichotomy. How does a coal company end up wanting to actually almost seem to cannibalize itself? But we saw from a long time ago that what was going to be important for us is going to be redefining who we are. And therefore, in looking at our own business philosophy, really our decision about our future have been really strongly influenced by our purpose. And that purpose is to power better lives in Africa and beyond. And we believe that we will fulfill this purpose through a strategy of remaining a central provider of resources that are critical to the sustainable development of South Africa and other developing countries as the world shifts towards a low carbon future. And the land we mine and the people who power our business and fund our investments have really entrusted us, being the communities, being the shareholders, and the country. We are the custodians of these assets. And to safeguard this value, we needed to accelerate change in our business, guided by our values and culture. And so really, what is shaping our strategy? What are the forces that are really shaping our strategy? And again, I just want to highlight, for us, being sustainable, we had to ensure that we remain relevant way into the future. It's all the building blocks we had to put in place to ensure that we are still relevant 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And we had to really understand what are those things that could derail our journey insofar as our strategy going forward. Climate change poses a significant risk to our business. It poses a risk to the capital markets and really has a negative impact on the ecosystem. And that in itself, that ecosystem became a vital point of understanding for us to ensure that in the fact that we are disturbers of land, how do we ensure that going into the future, we don't negatively impact on the ecosystem and society at large? As such, we have seen pressures in terms of stakeholder action against our business. You will have heard not too long ago that there were 2 coal-fired power stations that had been approved by the government as part of the new integrated resource plan. And those power stations had been really heavily contested insofar as whether they would come to existence by broader society, by the NGOs, who were very much against any new coal-fired power stations. And by and large, those power stations had to be abandoned. So in that instance, this pressure is something that we had to really contend with and say that in the future, these headwinds are going to get stronger. We're going to get headwinds against financiers who actually don't want to continue funding coal-powered generation going to the future. We had to contend with the fact that insurance companies are becoming much more reluctant in financing coal projects of the future. And we had to ensure that we had a solution of our own sustainability, being sustainable into the future against all of this. We are seen as big emitters, and therefore we have to come up with various strategies of how we respond to this. And so for us, the whole issue of this transition we are talking about, the energy transition from a coal fossil fuel based transition into a clean energy transition, was going to be very important for us to ensure that as we are responding to our strategy, we see also the opportunities that come with that. We had to also contend with the fact that the places where we mine, we actually end up at some point in time actually close these mines, and communities that were very much reliant on us for their existence. Once the mines were in operation, where they were getting job opportunities, where there were procurement opportunities, where there were opportunities in terms of social and labor plans, once those mines come to the end, those communities become ghost towns. And that is a future that we could not contend with going into the future if we're going to be a responsible player and a responsible contributor to broader societal impact going into the future, a positive one. So we had to also deal with this transition in terms of how are we going to ensure that as we are moving forward, we are taking everybody else along with us. And so we had choices. We had three choices. We can either continue to really grow our business as coal and just pretend. If you can just go back a few slides, please. I'm not yet there. I will let you know when we move forward. Just one more. We had to really contend as to whether we are going to just continue growing our coal business and pretend that, well, you know, let's just harvest this business and just pay all the money to the shareholders, or we can alternatively say, how do we manage a new path, a path that also recognizes the fact that we cannot just turn off these coal assets. We cannot just turn Eskom off and pretend that it's not going to have a dire impact on the communities at large. And therefore, ours was to say, how can we actually ensure that we don't have stranded assets, coal assets, whilst recognizing that we've got to do everything to try and decarbonize these assets along the way, while we use that to fund not only the shareholders in terms of dividends, but also to fund this transition to a low carbon economy. So that was how we had to think about this. And so to the next slide, please. So really our response, as I indicated, is that we had to understand that in going into the future, our early value coal strategy had to ensure that we look at those resources that ensures that we can be able to be resilient in terms of our market to resource strategy, because the market is becoming very dynamic in itself. So how do we respond to every market situation so that we have a robust business going into the future? Also with that, we had to look at how we take our current base in terms of renewable business that we have and build a global renewable energy solutions business, whereby by 2030, we have really got a business that is anchored around ensuring energy security in South Africa and also into the rest of other global markets. How do we build that? And how we use those renewable energy solutions also to decarbonize our own coal business, and but by and large in that making sure that we provide much cleaner power. We are also ensure that we can ensure security of energy supply, and also making sure that we are able to sustain and ensuring that we reduce our scope and our emissions going into the future. Not only for us, but also working with Eskom in terms of how we can support and help each other in terms of reducing our carbon collective footprint. With that being said, we also are very strong players in mining. And so for us, it was also going to be important to understand what are the minerals of the future that talk to a clean carbon future, a cleaner carbon future. And so we are diversifying our mining capability, using our mining capabilities into those minerals that are going to be supporting electrical vehicles, that are going to be supporting renewables businesses, that is going to be supporting the new green economy going into the future. So those are the new areas that we are going to be focusing on as a company. But most important for us is that if we don't do any of these things in a manner that ensures that the business can also provide sustainable impact into the future, we are not going to have a future as a company. We will not be able to deal with our communities insofar as making sure that we take them along with us. So hence why when we talk about our strategy, it's not just about the sustainable growth. It also has a very, very huge element in terms of the impact side. And what do we mean by this impact? How do we achieve this impact? It's about how we leverage our land. You know, the mining industry, probably besides government, are the largest probably landowners in the country. But by and large, the way we utilize this land has never been one which is very imaginative about how we actually create future impacts around communities long after we have stopped mining. Ours was always just about mining, and because of legislative requirements, we have to rehabilitate the land and green the land. But sometimes in doing that, we are not very cognizant of the fact that from an ecological point of view, even in the way that we are rehabilitating land, we are creating such biodiversity that actually is quite negative. That actually is the type of trees that we are putting, the type of vegetation that we are putting there is actually the one that is actually sucking up the water and therefore making the land, it may look more pretty, but the land is no longer useful for the communities at large. So we have to reimagine and rethink about how we can actually ensure that we can repurpose this land in a manner that will ensure that we can recreate and regenerate new economies going into the future. And so in that, we are talking about a transition to a low carbon economy, whilst at the same time ensuring that we positively impact our communities positively. And therefore, just to highlight a few things that we have done also internally as a company, just to show that we are also taking the whole thing of sustainability very, very seriously. In 2019, the board approved the adoption of the TCFD recommendation as a strategic framework for guiding our climate change response strategy. In March 2020, we made our position on climate change clear when we published our climate change position statement to attain carbon neutrality by 2050. And of course, with that, we are putting now in place our projects, our milestones in terms of where we want to be by 2025, by 2030, by 2040, right up to 2050. And we believe that in that, we will be able now to really focus where our teams are driving this, driven by the board, driven by our risk and sustainability committee of the board, making sure that we do achieve these targets by then. And so just going to the next slide, please. And so therefore, when looking again at our response, a strategic response, is also predicated on the fact that we are looking at our assets and our operations, as I indicated before, where we ensure that we have a portfolio of quality assets that are flexible to meet changing market conditions. We are also ensuring that in terms of our people, that we continue being a learning organization where we are taking our experiences of the past and we are translating some of the skills in terms of our people, building new capabilities, new skills that are also going to be transported into the area of renewable energy. We have also been driven by the strategy that we took many years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, around a whole digital journey that we have been on as Xaro, whereby 3 years ago, we built the first digital mine in South Africa, which is fully digital and which has enabled us to ensure that we've built new skills and capabilities within our organization, where now we even have data scientists within our businesses, and we are able to reimagine the way the future of work and are beginning to reskill all our workforce in terms of digital capable skills that are going to be supporting a whole new future that we are building that are going to be driven by innovation. And also what we are also doing is that from the ESG and impact side, we continue to create this impact beyond compliance. And this is demonstrated by a number of things that we have done, which really ensures our sustainability in the communities that we are operating in. Firstly, our active participation in the regional collaboration platform, which is called the Impact Catalyst, where we have partnered with Anglo-American, CSIR, World Vision, Zaturi, and the IDC for regional development and support of provincial economic development plans in Limpopo, Mpumalanga, the Northern Cape. We are doing this with other also mining companies within the Mineral Council, South Africa. Secondly, we are also partnering with the NBI on municipal capacity building programs, which is an outcome of the Presidential Jobs Summit to support the Waterberg district with their district development model. Because we do understand and appreciate that our municipalities are totally malfunctioning. And therefore, through a program that we are working with NBI, we are funding mentors, experienced people who have retired, engineers, technicians, financiers with critical skills in project management to support and mentor the managers in these various municipalities in terms of the projects that they are responsible for in terms of service delivery, to make sure that we can support them in actually implementing this so that they can actually start responding to the needs of the people on the ground, so that we don't end up having the challenge that we had a few months ago, where most of the rioting that took place in this country was at the core of it. The lack of service delivery, the lack of ability to create jobs, and the dissatisfaction of the people on the ground in terms of the high levels of poverty and inequality and high youth unemployment. These are the things that we are all trying to solve for. And therefore, our enterprise and supplier development programs are around looking exactly at that. But that's not enough in terms of impact. One of the big drivers and programs that we are working with as Xaro right now, as part of this whole new reimagining of the land, is a project that we have been working on over the last 18 months with the Vatican, whereby if you look at the Vatican and you are looking at Pope Francis' vision for humanity, where he talks about how mining can play a common good in terms of society, we are very aligned with our own purpose of powering better lives. We have been working with them on projects which now we are going to be rolling out, and tips which are also looking at these projects and how these projects are going to have huge societal impacts. And these projects now across our operations across the country are being packaged in such a way that we are now going to be proposing them at COP26 with the Vatican for impact in funders. But this is not for Xaro. We're not doing this thing for Xaro. We are saying that we are trying to create a platform that will enable others to reimagine the land in a way that we can create vast impact. So these projects, we are taking them to COP26. We are seeking impact investors. They've been designed for impact investments, and we are looking forward for others to be joining with this as part of the mining industry, also looking at that, and other stakeholders, because we believe that unless we can do this thing at scale, we will never be able to deal with issues, like I said, of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and also high youth unemployment. It's a problem and it's a challenge for all of us in South Africa. It's not just our own challenge, but it is a challenge with which I think by and large, the business community have come to realize that if we don't deal with this problem, a complex problem like this at scale, we all don't have a sustainable country, never mind sustainable business. We don't have a sustainable country because we've seen what has happened a few weeks ago. And so just going into the next slide. So for us, really, the vision of a resilient portfolio is where, firstly, we diversify our growth beyond coal. We look at energy as a business that we can utilize renewable energy as an opportunity to decarbonize and reduce our carbon footprint. But also, thirdly, that we have able to build an equitable and inclusive organization to drive an effective and efficient governance strategy and talent management through our diversity and inclusion strategy. And in this regard, our priorities areas we are focusing on is on gender equality in terms of 50% women on management levels. We have recently announced that I will be stepping down in 2023 and May 2023. And the next CEO designate is Dr. Nombasa Tsengwa, a very, very highly talented, very, very capable lady who has been with this organization for close to 20 years. She was once head of SHAC. Now she's going to be the new CEO after me. Believe you me, I think she's going to do a much better job than I have done. And we're also targeting on fair pay as part of our diversity and inclusion strategy, and also with that, creating new job opportunities also in the energy and the minerals and the digital areas as we have highlighted. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as I go to my concluding slide, I just want to share with you that today, what we see on the slide, these are just my key messages. Climate change is accelerating and imposing a demand to change and shift to a new business models for a low carbon future. And therefore, our decision to change and shift is starting from a position of strength, which has provided options for low carbon growth and an ability to transition. And we believe the options that we have created and the choices to build an impactful business portfolio by maximizing the value for our coal business, thus enabling the transition through the creating a new renewable energy business to provide energy security and reduce emissions, and to build our minerals capability to a diverse minerals business, and also ensuring that as we go through this transition, we don't leave anyone behind. This is going to be the future that we believe as Xaro we will be able to withstand the forces that we are seeing coming at hand, but more importantly, we will be the creator of the future that we believe will be sustainable to ensure that not only our children, but our grandchildren are able to reap the rewards of our sweat, because by and large, if we don't do it today, their future is at stake. So our choices we make today around sustainability, our choices that we make around ensuring that this planet is a planet that is going to be around for the next 50 years, 100 years, 1,000,000 years, rests in our hands. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we see the future as one where we are responsible as a company, that we should all be responsible as a country, we should be responsible as a citizen, that we ensure a brighter future for the generations to come. Thank you very much.
Odisi, there aren't really many words to say to follow on that presentation, except to say a huge thank you. So many things to think about and so many things to consider, but most importantly, I think your noteworthy leadership in that area. in a business that isn't easy, in a business that is not traditionally associated by any means with sustainability. But your fundamental shift and the change in that strategy, when I think about it and I reflect on what you said, you've taken classic strategy, integrated the sustainability themes, and shifted that in a directional change in a business to ensure its own survival in the longer term. And you've made it sound so easy, but by no means is it easy. I think the second point of reflection for me is when I think about when you talked about Pope Francis and his vision for humanity. And everything else that you've said has really built on that in many ways when we've talked about that. And, in sustainability, often we talk about the fact that a business cannot thrive in a society that is failing. You have permeated that in every bit of what you said and explained to us today and made it very clear why that is the case. So it's not a nice thing to say, but it is a practical reality that we need to deal with, and brought home many of the challenges that we're facing as a country. I think that the ability of Xaro to think about things at that level, to have a vision that is informed with really a higher purpose on really a vision for humanity and where it can go, and actually tailor your business around that rather than the business doing what it needs to do and whatever the outcome is, people are a taker of, is actually a fundamental shift in the way we think about business. So I think many noteworthy takeaways from there, and I just want to ask if your post-Xaro career is going to be to run for president. I think you're going to have many supporters.
That one I will pass. The other way that I can contribute, but that one, it's got its own challenges.
No, absolutely. And I think also what was also very noteworthy is where you're understanding and making the connection between a sustainable future and finance and the investment challenge and capital markets as well. So that was the other one where you've made my job very easy as a JSE, where we, of course, understand that this is what is coming. We're seeing the pressure coming to bear on the market, but you've preempted that already, going back to when you started the renewables business ahead of, I think, probably most peers in the world in your space, and thinking about that and seeing where that's coming from. So I'm hoping you're also now going to benefit from the upside of the tide, which is investors now saying this is what we want and not this. And you're kind of well positioned to be able to pick up on that shift that's happened again very quickly in the last number of years, with this fundamental shift in where capital is wanting to go as well. I'm not seeing any immediate questions. I just want to have a look at these. Okay, there was a question here, but no, actually, I don't think this was directed at Xaro, and on looking at internal audits and auditing standards and things. I think that might have been for the previous speaker. I'm also going to quickly reflect on some comments before I say any further there, please, in policy. So here's some wonderful comments. I think a lot of adulation from the audience. This is saying, great strategy, Xaro. Gabby's saying, Mr. Mgojo, this is very exciting to have you here today. Andile saying, great initiative on working with the Vatican, and all the best at COP26, Xaro. We hope to see you there. That would be fantastic. And no other questions per se. I'm sure people are still just thinking about what they want to ask you after you've really, really made them think about a number of different things. But you see, the question that I have is that if I reflect on what you're saying, to me, it seems like there was a while back a realization of effectively an existential crisis, right? What is it and what do we need to do to survive? And what Xaro has done is beyond just saying that, because that kind of seems to be the in-fashion thing to say. You've changed it into saying, how do we become future fit? And you did explain a little bit at the beginning about thinking about this, but you're also ahead of the curve in making many of those changes. In your view, you've been with the company for many, many years, even prior to being CEO. What would have spurred that change? What in the culture or the DNA, or is there a moment you could possibly put it down to that you could say basically preempted this fundamental shift? And I'd like to hear a little bit about that, because I think many companies on the journey are trying to think, what is that thing that will push the dial to help that change happen?
I have been with the organization now since 2001. by and large, Xaro came into existence in 2006. But before then, you had two companies that came and merged in 2006. You had Eyesizwe Coal, and you had Kumba Resources that came to merge in 2006. And I recall very clearly our previous CEO, Mr. Sipho Nkosi, we were founding members of Eyesizwe. And when we were bidding for those assets from Anglo and Ingwe, as part of our submission that we made back in 2000 at that time, after a very rigorous bidding process, we recall when we always talk about this up to today with Sipho, we dared at that time just buying 4 small coal assets that in our submission documents was that we said, with these assets, we want to create a stepping stone to build a diversified resources and energy business company that is South African based and with a global footprint. And so therefore that journey that we started then has been our guiding beacon right through at the time when Eyesizwe was created, right up to merging to create Xaro, with Sipho taking over as the CEO of Xaro. And during my earlier days in marketing of coal, Sipho and I were always talking about the vision that we had at that time. And so with that, it became very easy in 2009 to say the signals, we are seeing the signal. And true to what we said back then in 2001, we said the time has come for us to start thinking about this shift. And that's when we started looking at renewables at that time, when we were seeing this shift taking place. So this has been not something that just happened overnight. It's been a journey. It's something that we had a passion about long time ago. And therefore, for me, it was very easy when I became to CEO to say that during this period, the fact that we have a JV with Tata Power, which is a 50-50, the time has come that we actually take over Tata Power so that now we can drive that future quite aggressively. But we also recognized during that period, because we were a coal business, we had to play at the top of our game in terms of ESG. We had to ensure that, given the fact that we are seen as a dirty business, around environmental stewardship, around societal issues, around governance, we had to ensure that we're at the top of our game. And hence why we embarked on a strategy long ago around the whole support of the UN SDG goals, and making sure that whatever we're doing, we're not doing it just for a tick box exercise, but we are doing it because we are committed to this thing. It is the right thing. It's going to be the thing that's going to differentiate us, and it's going to be the thing that's going to ensure our sustainability for the future. So it's been it's not just one event. It's been a concerted journey over many years about looking at a future of which we believed we could create. And therefore, we are saying again that the future will be realized by our own efforts of creating that future.
You're creating the future. No, thank you for that, Mlisi. I want to ask one more question. I'm just going to quickly reflect on a comment first. From Fundise, thanks Shamila for arranging this. What a great start to the day. Xaro has always been a company to admire in the mining space, and well done to all the presenters. So there we go. To actually say I admire a mining company is quite an achievement, I think, in Polisi. So that is fantastic. And thank you to Fundisa for her comment. I also want to ask you another question around Xaro's journey. Now, I know in hindsight, it's easy to piece the pieces together and to be able to pick that journey up. But what were your key challenges along this path? To start that early on, has it undoubtedly would have had challenges. You would have had your dissenters, you would have had maybe some naysayers. Was there any of that along the way? And if there was, how did you deal with it? What were your key challenges, particularly starting early on? I think someone starting now, the imperatives are different. People are more likely to buy into that strategic vision now, knowing what we know right now. But in 2006 is likely not to have been the case. Am I wrong? Or maybe you could just share your view on that.
Yes, look, make no mistake, we have made mistakes along the way. Like any other business, we have had to impair billions of rands along the way. Yes, that is part of the nature of the business. But I think what has been, a very big challenge is having a vision of not just what's happening in the next coming 5 years from a business plan cycle, but thinking about the business in terms of long-term horizons, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. That's how we have been looking. That's how I look at business. And in doing that, you start taking the organization and the people in your organization and your stakeholders into very uncomfortable territories. Because, who knows how 20 years is going to look like? But that's not the issue. The question is that how do you prepare and create a path towards 2020, 20 years from now? And really being able to have, I don't want to say that foresight or insight, because I don't have a crystal ball. We don't have a crystal ball, but just being brave to take the step, being brave and courageous to accept the fact that you're going to make mistakes. But in making the mistakes, don't see them as negative. See them as opportunities to learn. Because I always say that a child learns by falling before they actually walk. Nobody ever says the child is failing when the child is falling all the time. And so we seem to, as business, to think that for something to happen exactly the way you had envisioned, that if it doesn't happen like that, it is a failure. I've got a different view, is that what have I learned from that? And how can I do it better? And so I think it has always been able to take the people along. When we went into this whole digitalization strategy as a mining company, where you are going to say you're going to build the first digital mine, people think you are cuckoo, right? But everybody talks digital today. If you're not talking digital as a business, whether it's mining, you are actually not going to be around for a long time. So I think it's just to have that courage. It's a lonely space. I can say that. It is a lonely space being there, because sometimes when you look back, there are not too many people behind you, following you. But you have to have that conviction that, yes, others have done it. There's a very good book that really inspired me to a large extent. And it's a book that Sipho came into contact with many years ago. And when he got into contact with this book, he found that it was no longer published. And he went and found out that a family, because this book was about an individual, and he had to approach the family to say, and the publisher to say, can I republish this book? Because it is so inspiring. And that was the story of Van der Bijl. You've heard of Van der Bijl Park. Yeah. Van der Bijl is the father of industrialization in South Africa. Eskom exists today because of Van der Bijl. ISCO existed because of Van der Bijl. The IDC existed because of Van der Bijl. Many sectors that were created that supported all those industries where the Van der Bijl was the father of. He was the father of industrialization, and everybody thought he was crazy. The only person who was behind him all the way, interestingly, was Jan Smuts, who actually asked Van der Bijl, who was a South African born, who happened to have gone overseas and was doing great things for America, brought him back. And he said, industrialize South Africa. So we gift out these books. Instead of gifting wine at the end of the year, we were giving people these books for free to say, as a country, we can reindustrialize South Africa. But we have to believe in ourselves. We have to have a long-term vision for this country and actually roll up our sleeves. Today, South Africa can learn a lot from what Van der Bijl did about what we can go and do into the future. So I will share that book with anybody who says that. I will show it, I'll give it to you guys, and you can publish it in terms of what the book is, but it's a great book on Van der Bijl, the father of South Africa's industrialization. Sorry?
Okay. What is it called, Mthulisi?
Van der Bijl.
It's just called Van der Bijl. Okay.
Yeah, it's a biography of Van der Bijl.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure you've piqued the interest of many of our listeners on the call today. Thank you for sharing that. Very, very nice to know, but also, good to reflect on our history sometime and look at some of those successes and think that there's opportunity right here, built right here, to be able to look at back and reflect on that. So, Mthulisi, it's been a fascinating conversation with you and fascinating to listen to you. And congratulations on what Xaro has been able to achieve. I think we really look forward to what next is going to be on your horizon, on your personal horizon, but also on that of the company. And I think I personally am going to very much look forward to what's coming out of the COP26. I hope it's going to be a predecessor for some fantastic, interesting listings on the JSE, possibly on our sustainability segment with green bonds or social bonds to support scaling up some of the projects that you're looking at. And I think that's very, very exciting. So for us, from my side, I think, Mthulisi, thank you very much for taking your time out. We fully appreciate the time that you've taken today. I think you would have inspired many, many people on the line. The comments are fantastic. Also, the takeaways, the courage of your convictions, have a vision, don't be scared to fail, fail fast and learn from that. And really at the core of it, I'm going to go back to what you said. What is your vision for humanity as a person beyond just your business as usual? Mthulisi, thank you for those inspirations. You've left us with a fantastic note to end today. Very grateful. Thank you to everybody on the call who's taken time to listen to us. You've been through a journey with some of the greatest companies on the JSE. You've listened to Xaro, Woolworths, MTN, Sanlam, different industries, completely different takeaways, different stages of their journeys. But I think we can agree, all of them, great stories to listen to, lots of learnings. No matter how far you're on your sustainability journey, always something new to learn. Thank you to those companies who are helping the JSE manage our vision of creating shared prosperity and really being a place and a market that can grow with resilience and be a place to be listed into the future and be a fantastic opportunity to invest for our country and to grow together. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to every company, every presenter. Don't forget, there's more to come. 2:00 is our climate risk and opportunity panel, which I am sure is going to be a lit panel, having been part of the discussions prior to this and the dry runs for that session. Please join us at 2:00. Fantastic panel, lots to learn, great speakers. And then, of course, tomorrow, our Transition Finance Symposium, again, a cutting edge topic in this country, something of huge relevance. And I think we'll have a little bit for each of you to take home, even if you're not in the finance space, just a lot to learn from both our international and local speakers. Without further ado, I leave you to the rest of your day and hope to see you later. Thanks and bye-bye, everyone.